History is full of eerie coincidences that seem almost too strange to be real. Some of these cases have baffled scholars, fueled conspiracy theories, and left people questioning the very nature of fate. From chilling connections between assassinations to inexplicable premonitions of disaster, these eerie events are both shocking and unsettling. Here are 10 of the most scandalous and shocking coincidences in history. Number 1. The Lincoln-Kennedy Connection. The assassinations of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy share a long list of bizarre similarities. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy in 1946. Lincoln became president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. Both were shot on a Friday, in the head, in the presence of their wives. Their successors, Andrew Johnson, born 1808, and Lyndon B. Johnson, born 1908, shared the same last name and were both Southern Democrats. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater, Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln car, made by Ford. Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was born in 1839, Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, in 1939. Booth was killed before trial, as was Oswald. Both presidents were also reportedly warned about assassination beforehand but ignored the warnings. While these connections may be a series of eerie coincidences, they have sparked numerous conspiracy theories about a deeper connection between the two killings. Number 2. The Titan and the Titanic, a prediction that came true. In 1898, 14 years before the Titanic disaster, American author Morgan Robertson published a novel titled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. The story described an enormous ocean liner named Titan, which was deemed unsinkable but tragically struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank, killing nearly everyone on board. The parallels between the fictional Titan and the real-life Titanic, which sank on April 15, 1912, are astoundingly precise. The Titan was 800 feet long, the Titanic was 882 feet. Both ships could carry about 3,000 passengers and had a top speed of 25 knots. Both had too few lifeboats, leading to massive loss of life. Even their sinking locations were eerily similar, both struck an iceberg 400 miles off Newfoundland in the freezing Atlantic. Robertson, a former sailor, claimed his book was simply based on knowledge of shipbuilding trends, but the level of accuracy in predicting one of history's most famous disasters is almost beyond belief. Some have even speculated that Robertson had a psychic premonition or access to hidden knowledge. After the Titanic disaster, the book was republished with a new title, The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility, and gained a reputation as one of the most prophetic works of fiction ever written. Number 3. The Eerie Presidential Death Curse of Zero-Year Elections. For more than a century, a chilling pattern seemed to doom every U.S. president elected in a year ending in zero. Known as the Curse of Tippecanoe, or the 20-year curse, the phenomenon suggests that presidents elected in these years would die in office, a pattern that held true from 1840 to 1960. It started with William Henry Harrison, elected in 1840, who caught pneumonia after his long inaugural speech and died just 32 days later, marking the shortest presidency in history. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, was assassinated in 1865. James A. Garfield, elected in 1880, was shot in 1881 and died of infection. William McKinley, elected in 1900, was assassinated in 1901. Warren G. Harding, elected in 1920, died mysteriously in 1923, possibly due to poisoning. Franklin D. Roosevelt, elected in 1940, died in 1945 while still in office. John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960, was assassinated in 1963. The pattern appeared unbreakable until Ronald Reagan, elected in 1980, who was shot by John Hinckley Jr. in 1981 but survived. Similarly, George W. Bush, elected in 2000, completed 2 full terms without serious assassination attempts. Some believe modern medicine and security improvements finally broke the curse, while others suggest that it was merely a bizarre historical coincidence. Number 4. The Cursed Hoover Dam Workers. The construction of the Hoover Dam in the 1930s claimed many lives, but the first and last deaths are particularly eerie. The first man to die was J.G. Tierney, who drowned on December 20, 1922, during initial site surveys. Exactly 13 years later, on December 20, 1935, the last recorded death was Patrick Tierney, J.G. Tierney's son. Some believe the dam carries a supernatural curse due to the staggering number of lives lost during its construction. Number 5. The strange parallels between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. The relationship between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams was one of rivalry, friendship, and, ultimately, a spooky coincidence in death. These two founding fathers played key roles in shaping the United States, Adams as its second president and Jefferson as its third. Despite their political clashes, they both contributed to the Declaration of Independence, which was officially adopted on July 4, 1776. Now, here's the eerie part: both men died on the exact same day, July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of American independence. Even stranger, Adams' reported last words were "Thomas Jefferson survives," not realizing that Jefferson had already died just a few hours earlier. The odds of two former presidents, central to America's founding, dying on the nation's birthday, exactly 50 years later, seem astronomically low. Some view it as a bizarre coincidence, while others see it as history's poetic timing. Adding to the mystery, James Monroe, the fifth U.S. president, also died on July 4, but in 1831, exactly 5 years after Adams and Jefferson. This trend of founding fathers passing away on Independence Day only deepens the strange significance of the date. Number 6. The Omen of Edgar Allan Poe's time-traveling novel. Edgar Allan Poe, famous for his dark and mysterious tales, may have predicted a real-life tragedy decades before it occurred. In 1838, he wrote the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, a novel about a shipwreck where the survivors are forced to resort to cannibalism. The story features a character named Richard Parker, who was eventually eaten by his fellow sailors. In 1884, 46 years after Poe's novel A Real Shipwreck, the Mignonette left its crew stranded at sea. Desperate, they resorted to cannibalism and killed a cabin boy for food. His name? Richard Parker. The uncanny resemblance between Poe's fictional account and reality has led some to speculate that Poe had an inexplicable insight into the future. Number 7. The Curse of the Hoover Presidential Connection. Herbert Hoover, the 31st U.S. president, seems to have been at the center of multiple disasters. He was born in 1874, the same year as the worst U.S. financial crisis of the 19th century, the Panic of 1873. Later, as president, he oversaw the 1929 stock market crash that triggered the Great Depression. Even stranger, before his presidency, Hoover was a mining engineer in China and narrowly escaped death during the Boxer Rebellion of 1900. The eerie trend of Hoover's association with financial catastrophe and near-death experiences has led some to wonder if he was a man plagued by historical misfortune. Number 8. Mark Twain's prophetic prediction of his own death. Mark Twain, one of America's greatest writers, made a chillingly accurate prediction about his own death tied to the arrival and departure of Halley's Comet. Twain was born on November 30, 1835, just 2 weeks after Halley's Comet passed close to Earth. He later remarked that he expected to go out with it as well, famously stating in 1909, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet." In an eerie fulfillment of his own prophecy, Twain died of a heart attack on April 21, 1910, just 1 day after Halley's Comet reached its closest approach to Earth. Twain's prediction has become one of the most famous examples of eerie foresight in history, with some believing that he had an uncanny sense of fate, while others dismiss it as a mere coincidence. Either way, his life and death are forever linked to one of the universe's most famous celestial visitors. Number 9. The Curse of the Archdukes, Assassination, Chains of War, and Numbered Rooms. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria on June 28, 1914, is often considered the spark that ignited World War I. But what's less known is the deeply eerie chain of coincidences surrounding his death and its chilling aftermath. Ferdinand was warned multiple times not to go to Sarajevo that day. Even more unsettling, the license plate on the car in which he and his wife Sophie were shot read AII 118, which many interpret as a cryptic reference to the armistice ending World War I on November 11, 18. Though this connection may be symbolic, it sent waves through historians and conspiracy theorists alike. How could the very vehicle of his assassination carry a number eerily echoing the exact date the war it triggered would end? Even the sequence of events on the day of the assassination seems cursed. The original assassination attempt with a bomb failed, but one of the conspirators, Gavrilo Princip, later happened to encounter Ferdinand's car after it took a wrong turn, stopping directly in front of him by coincidence. Princip seized the moment and fired, killing both the Archduke and his wife. It gets stranger. The hotel where the couple stayed had a room number 319, the same number used for the bullet that struck Sophie, which is now stored in a museum. The sheer number of bizarre details, missed opportunities, and symbolic echoes has led many to call the entire sequence a murder orchestrated by fate rather than politics alone. Number 10. The strange parallels between Napoleon and Hitler. Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler, two of history's most infamous military leaders, were born exactly 120 years apart, Napoleon in 1769, and Hitler in 1889. Their rise and fall also followed an eerie timeline of 129-year gaps. Napoleon came to power in 1804 and immediately began his conquests across Europe. Hitler rose to power in 1933, launching his own expansionist policies. Both leaders attempted to conquer Russia, and both suffered catastrophic defeats after their armies were decimated by the Russian winter, Napoleon in 1812 and Hitler in 1941. Napoleon was ultimately defeated in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, while Hitler's regime collapsed in 1945, exactly 130 years later. Both were also exiled before their deaths, Napoleon to St. Helena, and Hitler to his bunker, where he eventually died by suicide. Even their supposed fates after death carry similarities. Napoleon's body was exhumed and reburied in France, while Hitler's remains were secretly buried by the Soviets before being exhumed and destroyed in 1970. The striking repetition of events and timelines between these two leaders has led some to believe that history repeats itself in mysterious cycles, or even that Hitler was Napoleon reincarnated.